Welcome to our webinar on supporting and developing business during COVID-19 in the DC metro region. My name is Veuger. I'll be moderating the conversation. I am an economist at the American Enterprise Institute and the chairman of the DC chapter of the Netherlands America Foundation, which is one of the three organizing organizations here, the other two being the Netherlands America Chamber of Commerce and the Baltimore Rotterdam Sister Cities Committee. We've also received helpful assistance from the Netherlands Embassy and the State of Maryland's Commerce Department. And so without further ado, let me get started. We will hear today from, first I'll introduce the seminar. After that, Andrew Kreinik of the Maryland Department of Commerce will speak about how the state support foreign direct investment. He'll talk about Maryland in particular, and then he'll talk about changes he foresees in foreign direct investment after the pandemic subsides. After that, we'll go to Jérome Larosch of the Dutch Embassy. We'll talk about the challenges Dutch companies are currently facing, the impact of COVID-19 on international business, and on how Dutch consulates in the US can help Dutch-owned businesses. We'll then turn to Joe Greco, back to Maryland. Joe will talk about current challenges to international and US-based logistics, about how retailers are facing a glut in inventory for non-high demand products, and on the one hand, and a shortage in high demand products on the other hand, and how his company and other carriers are helping retailers address these inventory management issues. And then finally, we'll hear from Martin de Groot, who shared his experiences on how the retail market has reacted to COVID-19, and specifically the advantage and drawbacks that he has seen for Dutch companies that he works with. So that's the plan in terms of the formal programming. After we've heard from our esteemed speakers, we'll have a bit of moderated discussion, and we will turn to your questions in the Q&A. And so with that, let me set the stage briefly. The DC, Maryland, Virginia region has not escaped the coronavirus, as all of you undoubtedly know. There are tens of thousands of cases and thousands of deaths that have already occurred in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And lockdown orders remain in place in all three areas, although Virginia has announced that it will be loosening some of its restrictions later this week. That loosening will take place mostly in the parts of Virginia that are not that close to DC. The reason for that is fairly straightforward. It's that the number of new cases in DC, Maryland, and Virginia has not really decreased in any kind of consistent way, and so policymakers are concerned about reopening. Now, the economic flip side of this situation, of course, is also known to all of you. We've seen here in the US a dramatic spike in the unemployment rate, which went to 14.7% in the month of April. There's a little bit of delay in reporting there, and so these are really numbers from a month ago. The real situation, if anything, is probably worse. That jump in the unemployment rate is the consequence of a dramatic increase in job losses. Right, and the figure here on the right, you can see what changes in employment look like in normal months compared to what happened over the past few weeks. And so that is certainly not good. These job losses have been very concentrated in leisure and hospitality, where we saw an unemployment decline of almost 8 million jobs in April. That's almost half of the total, but there's really been significant job loss and a large negative shock in almost every part of the economy, right? So large job losses in education, health, professional business services. The Q1 GDP report showed a similar picture of large negative shocks in a lot of sectors, including healthcare, which I think people did not expect would be hit as hard, but obviously the entire industry has been focused on the coronavirus, which has led to a significant revenue loss and the closure of physicians' offices, dentist offices, etc. Now, the federal government has responded to this in a variety of ways. I've listed some of the most important measures here. On the fiscal policy side, there's been a dramatic expansion of the unemployment insurance program, which now pays laid off workers $600 a week in addition to regular benefits, right? So that's a significant increase in the generosity of that program. There is the payroll protection program, which offers forgivable loans to small businesses. That's businesses with fewer than 500 employees. Relief checks have gone out to all households. There's $150 billion or so has gone out in support for state and local governments to face new expenses, right? So this does not yet deal with the losses in revenue that a lot of state and local governments are facing. This is purely to address COVID-related new spending. And then there's been a significant amount of money for hospitals and for testing. On the monetary policy side, the federal funds rate is down back to zero. And the Federal Reserve has really been very aggressive in providing support for practically every credit market you can think of, as you can see from the list here. Outside the Federal Reserve, Freddie and Fannie have also offered forbearance to mortgage holders who are insured through them. So this is obviously a very quick, broad overview. I'm happy to talk about this in more detail in the Q&A. The focus here, of course, is more on business support than on things like unemployment insurance. And so here is a list of the biggest programs that have been rolled out. So you see the payroll protection program that I mentioned, $700 billion, a massive program, an expansion of economic injury, the economic injury disaster loan program, also through the Small Business Administration. And then I don't know why I pasted net operating losses there in the main bullet point, but quite a bit of tax relief too, which for some reason has not gotten the attention that it perhaps deserves. So much more flexibility for businesses to carry forward and carry back operating losses, to deduct interest payments, and in addition, support for businesses that are retaining their employees and in the sense that they receive tax credits and do not have to pay their payroll taxes yet. So that's me setting the stage at the sort of macro level, and now I would like to turn to Andrew.
Hi, this is Andrew Kreinik, and let me just bring my screen up. I'm 2 months on telework, so I am reporting live from my kitchen. Okay, great. So I'm from the Maryland Department of Commerce, from the Office of International Investment and Trade, and I work with both helping Maryland companies to export as well as work with foreign direct investment. So I work with companies that are interested in investing in the state of Maryland. And many of the things I'm going to be talking about are common not just in Maryland, but throughout the country. So well, I'm going to be Maryland specific. Some of the things that I will be displaying are representative of what goes on in the rest of the country. So just to orient you, I wanted to show you where Maryland is in juxtaposition to the rest of the country. You see we have a very location on the East Coast. And this is naturally very important for us because of the distribution network that we have. The Port of Baltimore is the closest inland port to the Middle West here. And of course, we are by the presence of Washington, D.C. and all the federal agencies and the federal research institutions that are located in Washington or its immediate surroundings. So when companies are looking to locate in Maryland as well as in other states, they are often provided with different kinds of financial incentives. Among those would be tax incentives. Now, but with the tax incentives, I have to say that many of them are designed for larger companies. Many of them start out at giving tax incentives if you're hiring more than 50 employees. There are other different kinds of incentives, and the post-COVID period is going to be changing some of those incentives. So I would recommend that if you are interested in locating, whether here or in another state, that you inquire about the current status of what tax incentives are. It would be the same thing with special economic zones. We have set up different kinds of economic zones in the state of Maryland where we try to encourage economic activity and we encourage investment. Those also may be subject to change given the general state of the economy at this point. Maryland provides workforce incentives. We have customized workforce training programs as well as apprenticeship programs that can really be customized so that companies that need and require certain kinds of skills would be able to get those skills. We work in association a lot with the community colleges, which are two-year colleges. They're not part of the university system. Each county has its own community college, and those community colleges often will work with companies in terms of developing specific training programs. As well, there are often subsidies to buy land and buildings. Again, this is generally reserved for larger companies, and this is true whether in the state of Maryland or in other parts of the country. So why would smaller companies want to move to Maryland? We tend to look at the business environment. It's a very easy state to do business. If you want to set up a business here, you can do it directly online. It shouldn't take more than an hour, maybe 2 hours tops in order to set up a business. We make it as business friendly as possible. We also have a very skilled workforce. We have the largest proportion of the population having advanced degrees in the country. So it's quite a skilled workforce, particularly in areas like biotech and cybersecurity. We have an excellent educational and training programs. If we're looking at cyber, we have an excellent workforce development pipeline that reaches out to the universities. So it's on a PhD level, a master's level, a bachelor's level, a certificate level, and then we are now reaching into the high schools. So we try to develop a really skilled workforce for the companies that are in Maryland. We also make sure that the intellectual property is protected. We can provide names of different kinds of attorneys that can assist with the intellectual property protection. And we have great business support services because we have so many small businesses located in Maryland, and it had been and it will be a thriving economy again. As a result, we have a huge number of business support services that we can offer. Now, I pointed out the location of Maryland. What we have here is the necessary infrastructure. We have ports, we have international airports, we have highways, we have large areas of warehousing. So in addition, we have about 40-some incubators for small companies to be able to locate in. So we've been very focused on developing the proper physical infrastructure. We have among the highest in the country of quality connectivity, and it extends throughout most of the state. There are some areas that still need a good quality broadband connection, and actually that provides an opportunity for potential investment, and I'll be going into that. We've got an excellent distribution network and support system. For distribution, Amazon has been locating warehouses in Maryland because it is such a good centralized location with the port, rail, and highway facilities. It's also an affordable place to live, and it has a very desirable lifestyle. Maryland is known as America in miniature. We have mountains, we have the ocean, we have the bay. We have it's a rather progressive place to live. So about 14% of our population is immigrant population, and everyone here is welcome. Now, what about the post-COVID changes to FDI? Well, you know, given restrictions on travel, and we don't know how long those restrictions will last, we're looking at the potential of trade shows not occurring for another 12 to 18 months. We just received notice of a trade show that we go to in Australia that has been pushed back from February 2021 to November 2021. So it's what we're finding is that it's really necessary to have a good domestic partner. And does that location provide quality partners? If you are involved with cybersecurity, biotech, food distribution, aerospace, space industry, we've got excellent partners for you to work with. So if you're looking for an agent, a distributor, or a joint manufacturing partner, we've got them here. Now, I had mentioned about high quality internet connectivity. This is going to become even more important. Fortunately, throughout most of the state, we have excellent high quality connectivity, and that should be of major concern to anyone interested in investing in the state of Maryland and putting a facility in the state of Maryland. It's, like I said, we are expanding it to the rest of the state, particularly in the west and on the eastern shore. And that does provide an opportunity for those companies that are interested in helping build out that infrastructure. Currently, because of the supply chain and the stresses on the supply chain, there is and there will be a continued desire for local suppliers and domestic supply chains. We also don't know about the possibility of increased protectionism. However, the mood in the country is to localize its suppliers as much as possible. So a reason to have FDI and locate a facility here is to reduce the length of that supply chain rather than depend on shipments from Europe, from China, etc. And potentially there are going to be lower investment thresholds to qualify for incentives. As I had mentioned earlier, with the tax incentives or with assistance in buying buildings or qualifying for a program that will help train employees. Given the urgency to improve the economy after the COVID crisis is finished, there could in fact be potentially lower thresholds. So I would keep that in mind when you are interested in investing. Sometimes you'll be supplied with investment documentation that is pre-COVID. Well, please inquire, because there could be different kinds of thresholds in order to encourage you to locate here. Now, I wanted to talk about opportunities that will be here in Maryland. You know, one thing about COVID, it did expose a lot of areas that need strengthening and improvement. And as a result, they do provide levels of opportunities. I'll give you a brief list. I didn't want to list them on this PowerPoint because they can change, and I want you to be thinking about the different kinds of opportunities that will occur as a result of the post-COVID environment. Now, Maryland is a very strong place for vaccine development, and for any Dutch company that may be interested in participating in the vaccine development, Maryland is an excellent location. I'm sure you have all heard about our shortages of PPEs. So anyone who is producing anything for PPEs, because we don't know about pandemics in the future, and I'm sure that we're going to be building up our stock. We're going to be looking to shorten the supply times for PPEs. That presents another opportunity. Air purification systems, because we all talk about how indoors you're much more at threat to have some sort of vector of infection. So as a result, that does provide an opportunity for you there. Maryland is very strong in developing drones. There are opportunities for drone deliveries. So for any companies that are interested in participating in drone deliveries, drone technology, Maryland provides a good opportunity for that. We talk about shortening the supply chains. Food is something that is of concern. You also may have read about the issues that we are having with poultry and meat production. Those are very long supply chains coming from centralized locations. So the opportunity there is to help shorten those, to have localized food production, to have vertical urban farming, having smaller footprint grocery stores in neighborhoods, anything to shorten those supply lines. Video conferencing, as we're doing now. We have, like I said, we have over 40 incubators. Well, it may not be possible to travel to those incubators in order to take advantage of our soft landing programs. So there's a possibility with virtual incubator technology, robotics, and automation in order to remove certain kinds of threats from the workforce in terms of different kinds of contagions. Telehealth. Telehealth is growing right now. It's kind of where we are in terms of healthcare provision for those people who do not have COVID. They're being referred to telehealth. So they're great opportunities. Another opportunity is in upgrading local and state technology systems. I think that we have all found that our technology systems are not what they need to be in face of the pandemic. So I would encourage you that if you do have a technology that can be of assistance to local and state governments, that now's the time to introduce some of those and get a location here, start up a pilot program, if possible, right here in Maryland. So there are other areas of opportunity. We're facing climate change. Maryland has issues with rising seas, salinization of soils. We have huge poultry facilities where we have poultry waste. There are once you start looking at the different kinds of opportunities that we have here for both cleaning up the environment as well as accommodating the changes that are necessary for COVID, they're pretty broad scale opportunities. So what we can do is, in terms of our services, if you're interested in the state of Maryland, naturally you can communicate directly with me or any of my colleagues. We can arrange for site visits, we can do research, we can help you find real estate, we can make introductions, and we have ongoing assistance. It's kind of like a concierge program that we have in order to assist companies that are interested in investing here. And it's, we talk about shape your future in one move. And so we're very happy to be talking business. I have my contact information on this slide, but I'll be very happy to share that contact information with any of you. Okay, thanks very much. Stan?
Thank you very much, Andrew. With that, and we can talk more about your comments in the Q&A part of the discussion. But with that, let's turn to Jérome, who I hope it's ready to go. Jérome, do you have any slides, or are you gonna not engage in that kind of complicated technological adventure? It's probably wise.
Exactly.
Right, go for it.
I wanted to try and make this as uncomplicated as possible, at least from the technical side. First of all, my name is Jérome Larosch. Work at the Embassy of the Netherlands in Washington, D.C. And we are very happy that we could help to make this panel possible. We feel it's important, especially at this moment, to keep helping businesses from the Netherlands that want to come to the US to do business here, and assist, of course, all those Dutch businesses that are already on the American market. There are over 1,000 Dutch businesses that operate throughout the US and many, many more that export here. And all of them have been, of course, impacted quite a bit by the current crisis. So I wanted to talk a little bit to you about some of the challenges that we have seen Dutch companies face in doing business in the US in the past couple of months as a result of the crisis. Then briefly look at the sort of broader implications of the crisis on doing business also in the future. And then finally, say a few words about how the embassy and the economic network of the Netherlands in the US can help you do business here and assist you with your needs. So when it comes to the first issue, the impact of COVID, I think the most direct impact we have seen has obviously been disruptions in supply chains. Starting in already in January, we have seen that companies have had increased difficulty in getting supplies at the right time into the right place, and that is parts, it's inputs, it's final products, it's raw materials coming from Asia in the beginning of the crisis, and later on, I think it basically spread to a global challenge where well, a lot of the usual transport and logistics is disrupted, and companies faced increasing difficulties in doing business, reached out to us, and we have tried as much as we could to assist them in finding alternative suppliers or making sure that whatever transport that was available could be used for doing business. I think there are a few sectors where the disruption has been especially apparent. First of all, the food sector, where of course the closing down of schools, cafeterias, restaurants has shown a dramatic decrease in demand for food products, and at the same time the loss of a lot of logistics. A lot of airplanes that stopped flying from Europe to the US has meant that especially in the food and also flour sector, for instance, we've seen that companies have been really hit pretty hard by this crisis. As some of you might know, the Netherlands is the second largest agricultural exporter in the world. So this has definitely had a tremendous impact on businesses in the US, but frankly around the globe. Currently, I think we're seeing that in the food chain in the US, challenges are still rising, especially Andrew just mentioned meat production. I think that's definitely one of the sectors where there are serious concerns also for the coming months. And that's an area where we as Economic Network are very vigilant. Next to the food sector, I think we've seen that well, everything related to trade and transport has seen disruptions. Of course, the medical supplies, medical sector has had massive spikes both in demand for PPE and other related products, but also massive disruptions where well, countries have basically started implementing export restrictions or certain forms of export control to guarantee access of their own population to these products, and that has sometimes interrupted international supply chains pretty badly. So we've seen that a lot of companies in the medical sector have faced difficulties on that part. And that brings me sort of, I think, to the more broader point of disruption. If there is one message that we have received across the board from companies, small and large, that are already established in the US or that are are looking at coming into the American market or are currently doing business with American partners, it is that they are concerned about the openness of the international trading system. I think in the last couple of decades, we have seen a tremendous growth of world trade and also of transatlantic trade. And a main driver for that has been that the trading climate has been very open. Countries have allowed the free flow of goods and have guaranteed that companies could move their products and move their supply chains. And I think that has massively contributed to economic growth and development. But at the same time, it has probably also increased the vulnerability of those supply chains. And that is, I think, where now we see reactions on the policy side, both in Europe, but also in the US and in other countries, where I think everyone is starting to have a more precise look at to what extent open trade, open borders are not only a huge economic benefit, but possibly also pose risks to the security of supply. I think that's a very, very valid discussion to have, and it's probably one of the issues that we will be dealing with for months and years to come. But the message from the business community has been very clear. Please, please keep trade open, and please make sure that companies can continue to do business across borders. For a Dutchman, I think that sounds like music to my ears. We've always been a very open trading nation, and we certainly are striving to keep it that way, and to make sure that there is an environment in which companies can do business across borders, albeit with the security of supply that is needed, especially in certain sectors. So I think we need a balanced approach, a nuanced approach, and that is certainly something that we are working on. Then my third and final point, our assistance to businesses that want to come to the US or that currently do business in the US. As you might know, the Netherlands has an extensive diplomatic network in the United States, consisting of the embassy in Washington that I'm part of, but also 5 consulate generals in Miami, in Atlanta, in New York City, in Chicago, and in San Francisco. And I think in total, it's a network of more than 100 people that are getting out of bed every day to help Dutch businesses come to the US, come do business here, and provide assistance on all kinds of levels. So we help in developing market opportunities. We scan markets for opportunities. We can connect companies to potential business partners, help them in deciding where in the US it would be wise for them to establish, or which partners it would be wise for them to link up with. Of course, the embassy and the consulates have a large network of business professionals, of business groups, but also of lawyers, attorneys, et cetera, that can help businesses that want to make the step to the US to actually do it. And of course, as Andrew has already pointed out, there are many opportunities also in the DMV, in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area for doing business. So please don't hesitate to contact us, contact the embassy, or contact any of our colleagues. You can do that through nlintheusa.com, our website, which under the current Corona conditions is probably the fastest and easiest way to get in touch with us. But of course, as soon as things reopen, you're also ready to stop by, and we'll definitely pour you a cup of coffee. So with that, I hope I've given I've given a good overview of the current state of play and of what we are doing to help Dutch businesses. And I'd like to give it back to you, Stan.
Thank you, Jérome. I like the exotic idea of having in-person coffee with people. It's remarkable. Let's move on to Martin, have him speak first, and then go back to Joe. I think that's probably the most efficient way to go about it. All right, Martin, are you ready?
Excellent. I am ready.
All right.
Thank you for the introduction, Stan. As mentioned, Martin de Groot from NL2US. And I'm here to talk a little bit about the practical side of things in the retail business and for Dutch companies in the retail business. Let me start by introducing what we do as NL2US. So we work with various Dutch companies in the food business who bring their products to the US market and export their products. And we help them as the boots on the ground in the US with their sales and distribution, how to get the supply chain set up, how to get the containers into the US, pay duties, work with customs brokers, etc. Maybe for the e-commerce side, arrange the pick and pack, warehousing for them, and presentations or business development is usually with the bigger retailers like Costco and Walmart, Trader Joe's of this world. And then what you see is once they start exporting and there is success, then the next step is that they want a US structure, and we help them with setting up a US entity, the banking and the accounting side, as well as the federal and state tax side. And for the federal taxes, of course, there is a treaty between the Netherlands and the US.
All right, looks like we lost Martin, sadly. Well, while we wait for the various logistical problems to be resolved, I have a question here for, I think Andrew is probably the best person to answer the question, is whether the region will engage in any infrastructure upgrade programs on water and environmental infrastructure. It's a question from the Netherlands Water Partnership.
At this point, I'm sure that we're going to have to wait to see what happens with the budget. There are a lot of budgetary issues that have come up, and I'm sure there are going to be changes made. In the state of Maryland, though, the Chesapeake Bay is of prime concern. So any kind of, we need programs to help us clean up the Chesapeake Bay. As well as the Chesapeake Bay and the Annapolis area is one of the areas that's the most threatened by rising seas at this point. So there would be opportunities to work on rising sea projects as well as desalination of soils.
Excellent. I see that Martin has returned.
Yes.
All right, excellent. You want to go? You want to go ahead and continue where?
Let's try this again. Where was I? So I did the introduction of what we do for Dutch companies. Let's go to the next one. So what we've seen on the retail market so far is that total sales in retail has gone down. Specifically, the food and beverage area, where we focus on, has seen an increase of about 25% in sales. With the data that's info March so far. And specifically, if you look at store visits, the first 2 weeks, the panic shopping and hoarding, you saw a big increase in shoppers going to the stores. But since then, when the social distancing rules came into effect, of course, that has decreased. You go to the store less. You see a difference between the type of stores. The discounters like Food Lion and Aldi only have a few percentage, 5% drop in visits, while the higher end chains like Whole Foods and Safeway have a much higher drop in store visits. And on the other side of the spectrum, you see a big increase in online sales and local delivery of the online sales. So that could either be a curbside delivery where you order online and you go to the store and they bring it to your car, or you have it shipped to your house. And there's also several trends that you see in grocery that have started now in the past few weeks, and I think they're going to continue. And after this COVID-19 time is over, whenever that is, you see an acceleration in the transition to digital ordering. which means people buying online. So that means they don't go to a store like we saw, and that means less impulse buys, less new product trials, and less margin for the retailer in general, because it's more expensive for a retailer to do online sales than in store, brick and mortar. There's also be a big change in the eating habits of people, because obviously they're home, so there's much more home cooking, gone up 40%, and healthier home cooking, gone up 36%, which means a change in demand for the different product categories in retail, in the food side. And the last trend, I think, because of hoarding in the beginning, where a lot of items were sold out, you will see brand loyalty go down, and there will be a move to private label brands. That, together with a change in a new economic reality with a recession, there's obviously less economic confidence and spending. That means opportunities for growth for value-oriented store brands and meat-based products. By meat-based, I mean like flour and cookies and cereals, etc., and less luxury items. Another trend, I think, at the end of the day, is you will see that the smaller independent retailers will have a bigger problem surviving this time frame. And the bigger ones that already dominate the market now, like the Amazon, the Walmart, and the Costco, will even get bigger because they can adapt quicker to the new circumstances.
Sorry, Martin, could you speak up a little bit?
Okay.
Thank you.
What does this mean for my current customers? I work with about 20 companies from the Netherlands that bring their product to the US market. So the commodity products like cookies and dog treats, etc. We have seen an increase in sales, and luxury products. Luxury products has a decrease in sales. Sorry about that. And another advantage so far is that a lot of the buyers for all the big retailers have time at the moment. They also work from home. So there's a lot of time to work on projects for 2021, to work on new items. So there's a lot of opportunities as well. If we have Joe after me, then he can talk more about the supply chain. I've seen some delays in booking containers from the Netherlands, where the lead times are a little longer to get them over here. And I think there'll be some current disruptions in the trucking in the domestic area because of the protein plants that are closing. That means less trucks coming this way and less capacity to go the other way. Trade shows, Andrew mentioned as well, they've all been cancelled, etc. until September. So I do not expect any trade shows this year. This will be an opportunity to organize virtual trade shows. And lastly, what is this an opportunity for Dutch companies that are not here yet? I think you have to use this threat as an opportunity and adapt to the new circumstances, where there's going to be room for much more healthier products and home meal cooking. I think the Netherlands is ahead in that market, and there's lots of possibilities here. Products have to be cost efficient, and there's more room for private label items. And the thing is to do it now. Like I said, the buyers all have time and are looking for roll out their programs for 2021. They're sitting at home. This is the time to get their attention, to have a plan, to show them what you're doing right in Europe and what your opportunities are in the US because of that. And just to end with the general unique selling points of Dutch products in general, food manufacturing is about 5 years ahead in automation compared to the US, which gives them much more cost efficient production. And if you have capacity, it's a good opportunity to export to the US market. And in general, when I go somewhere and present Dutch products, we always seem to have a good name and seem to be reliable, and people trust products from the Netherlands, that they do what we say they do. That's a bit it from me, Stan, until we get some questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Martin. All right, Joe, do you think, let's see if your mic works. Oh, there we are. Outstanding.
All right, very good.
Thank you so much.
Yep, my apologies, not sure what happened there. So first of all, thank you very much for including me in this webinar. And you know, I'm happy to say that from a Baltimore perspective, our facilities are running strong. But let me just walk you through this brief PowerPoint that I put together. So just a little bit about Ports America. We are the largest stevedore and terminal operator in the United States. We have key operations on the East Coast, the Gulf, as well as the West Coast, and we handle multiple commodities, containers being our largest of the commodity groups that we handle. And we are the sole operator of Seagirt Marine Terminal in the Port of Baltimore, which is strategically located in the DMV region. So what have we done to ensure that we can maintain our vital position to support the supply chain here in the region as we work through the COVID-19 pandemic? So we've really taken a proactive approach. So you can imagine that we have a very high number of vehicles in and out of our terminals on a daily basis, as well as a large number of employees who operate the facility. So we've done a yeoman's task of doing daily sanitation of all our container handling equipment, including the ship-to-shore cranes, the rubber tire gantry cranes, top loaders, yard trucks, what have you. We also have clerks that we employ in our facilities that have a lot of high touch areas. So we're ensure we're cleaning those on a regular basis. When trucks historically have pulled up to our terminal from a gate perspective, they historically have picked up a handset like you would on a phone. But we've removed those touch points and provided wireless speakers to help from that perspective. And then when there was an issue on a terminal, a truck driver would get out of his truck and then talk to a customer service clerk. We very quickly adopted technology to take this out of the environment, where we now have a texting app that is working very well and is limiting the exposure for our employees as well as for the truck drivers coming in and out of our facilities. I'd be remiss in saying that we haven't took the same approach with ship's crew. So our frontline employees who are on the ships, they are not interacting with the ship's crew. And following the direction of the Homeland Security, the ship crew has been confined to the vessel and not leaving once the ship arrives in port. As you imagine, we work in a very fluid dynamic. We have casual labor, and as a part of a partner to us, the Steamship Trade Association, who manages the casual labor, and their dispatch center, they've implemented screening. So they're doing temperature checks at the hall where some casual workers get their orders for the day. And we're replicating this for our regular employees from a labor and management standpoint before we're allowing them on the terminal. So we certainly understand how important our position is in the supply chain throughout the country. What I'm providing you is specific here to Baltimore. And these are all things that, again, we have in place to ensure we can maintain the continuity of operations at Seagirt Marine Terminal. So just delving into a little bit of a perspective from a macro view on what the COVID pandemic has done to the industry. What I've provided here is just a little bit of a historical context on what is lay capacity. So in other words, when there's not enough demand in the industry, the ocean carriers will lay up or anchor ships. And you can see where we are in terms of the 2020 pandemic that we're in, far surpassing the global crisis of 2009, the recession of 2001. So it just gives you a sense of the magnitude of the challenge that the industry is faced, and it's really driven by lack of demand. And then just again, from a broader perspective, just taking a look at what the food services, retail sales, how they have been impacted, giving a little perspective of where we are compared to a Great Recession of 2008. And then what are the retail products that are actually moving? So I think Martin touched on this a little bit, but you can see it's obviously the food and beverage, general merchandise, healthcare, what have you. Please keep in mind, this does not take into account e-commerce. So some of these specific commodities are moving inside of e-commerce. For instance, we know that sporting goods are in hot demand right now. You can't buy them at Dick's. You can't buy them in a normal brick and mortar retail store, but from an e-commerce perspective, we know these things are moving because everyone is home and looking for something to do in their backyard. Furniture, home furnishing, clothing, furniture being one of the largest imports that we handle here in Baltimore, all significantly impacted, and demand certainly not there for them. I think this is a good opportunity to talk about some of the things that we're doing to help what we call the beneficial cargo owners or the shippers that fall into some of these categories. So let's stick with furniture. Because furniture is not moving, we came up with a storage product to help customers in the furniture business or moving other commodities that may not be in high demand right now. So we have a product where we would store containers on terminal on a grounded basis. So in other words, we take them off a chassis, we put them in a grounded location where the shipper would then not be responsible for the cost of a daily chassis fee. And then we've also talked to the ocean carriers being the steamship lines such as Maersk, such as Mediterranean Shipping Company, made them aware of this product, which they're supporting, to give customers the option to store a product at a month, 2-month interval while avoiding demurrage. So it's a good example of what we're doing to provide optionality. As Andrew has indicated, from a state perspective, we're very connected to the Maryland Port Administration, and with the team there, we're also trying to help our customers from a shipper standpoint find other alternatives to what we have provided in terms of storage, something possibly like a local warehouse that has capacity, or other options that can meet their specific needs depending on the time frame that they're looking to store the product. Conversely, we are also taking the steps and the efforts to ensure that the critical goods get out of our facilities as quickly as possible. So some of the PPE, some of the medical supplies, some of the essential food goods, we are supporting with priority service once the beneficial cargo owner makes us aware that these products are moving through our terminal. Our operation teams highlight them, we target them, and we get them through our facilities without any issue. I will say that our KPIs, being mainly vessel production and truck turn times, have been very, very aggressive here in Baltimore. The vessel production has been higher than it has been in the last several years, and the truck turn times are also very aggressive. And mind you, I think this is of great relevance for the audience as well. Our facilities have been impacted by numerous sailings that have been canceled, or what we refer to as blank sailings around the country. Baltimore, of all the places that we operate, has been impacted the least. So we have had 3 blank sailings to date in Baltimore, compared to approximately 14 in New York, New Jersey, over 20 in Savannah, upwards of 30 on the West Coast. So because of the strength of the market here in Baltimore, because of the great location that we have here in Baltimore, the demand has been relatively strong compared to the other places that I mentioned. So talking a little bit more about Veuger specifically, we are continuing to invest in the facility despite some of the challenges that we are faced with right now. We believe that Veuger in this region will continue to grow. We do think that this will be a challenge for the rest of the year and possibly the remainder of, or a portion of next year, I should say, in terms of volume. But as far as our commitment to the region and the state, we're continuing forward with plans to expand the facility. And one of the primary ones is actually expanding our berth capacity. So in 2010, we introduced a berth that can handle the largest vessels currently calling the East Coast. We do have the largest vessels calling Baltimore on a regular basis, and now we're duplicating that capability with this berth 3 modernization project, which will include 4 additional Super Post Panamax cranes as well as berth deepening. So we'll be able to handle 2 of the largest container ships simultaneously at Veuger Marine Terminal. In addition, we're looking at landside capacity. So we have moved on an additional 37 acres of land in partnership with the Maryland Port Administration, and we continue to move forward with a densification plan to increase our overall capacity, not only from a water side that I mentioned, but also from a land side. So densification, including different types of container handling equipment, different types of technology to support it, and overall increase of number of container handling equipment while we change some of the locations of the truck gates, maximizing the additional land that we have to work with. So I just want to make it very clear, although that our volumes will be down this year compared to last, based on the dynamic here in Maryland, we're very bullish on the capabilities and the growth aspects of Seeger and Baltimore and Maryland. And part of that logic is really what has been the only infrastructure challenge that the Port of Baltimore has faced. So when you think about the amount of water that the Port of Baltimore has, it can accommodate the largest ships on the East Coast, as I mentioned. When you think about air draft being the amount of space underneath the bridges that a ship would need to traverse to get to the Port of Baltimore, again, we can handle the largest ships on the East Coast. What Baltimore's Achilles heel has been for many years is a lack of double stack rail, primarily due to the lack of clearance in the Howard Street Tunnel. The Howard Street Tunnel is a legacy tunnel underneath the middle of the city that's pre-Civil War era. It's not tall enough to accommodate double stack intermodal containers. When we look at competing ports in New York, New Jersey, as well as Norfolk, both of those gateways can support it. But I'm happy to say that through the partnership with the state of Maryland, CSX, and the Maryland Port Administration, funding has come together to push this project forward. So despite the challenges associated with COVID, this is another example of a massive infrastructure investment that is occurring in the region that can continue to support the growth of the Port of Baltimore, Seeger Marine Terminal, and the supply chain in the overall region. So again, just a very quick synopsis. I do think that we have positioned ourselves very well to continue to provide vital service to the region, keeping the supply chain moving, and we're very excited about what the future holds here in Maryland once we get through these challenging days. So Stan, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Joe. We have a little bit of time left. I'm not going to use my own prerogative as moderator because we only have a few minutes, but I want to get to some of the questions in the Q&A window. First, Andrew, here's a question about a soft landing program that Maryland has together with the Dutch province of South Holland. Whether you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we have the MOU with Innovation Quarter, and it specifically covers cybersecurity and biotech and life sciences. However, we're looking to expand the areas of cooperation. So with our soft landing program, companies are able to come to Maryland and locate in an incubator. They can have a hot desk. They can make any kind of arrangement they want with the incubators. And there are different kinds of executive training programs to familiarize the incoming Dutch business people about doing business in the U.S. By the same token, Maryland companies can go to the incubators in Rotterdam area and get the same kind of service.
Excellent, thank you. The second question here is more of a question for Jérome. Jérome, the question is whether there are U.S. laws or aspects of U.S.-EU trade policy that make U.S.-Netherlands supply lines more rigid and less able to adapt in the current crisis. And presumably whether there are any suggestions you may have to improve the policy environment in that respect.
Thanks, Stan, and thanks for the question. I think it's hard to point at specific policies that would make supply lines more rigid or less flexible. But I think there's maybe a more of a general point when it comes to the transatlantic relation that that might be a factor here, and that is certainly uncertainty. So I think we've heard from investors and companies alike that the number one worry they have about the transatlantic relationship and about doing business transatlantically is frankly the fact that the policy environment has been pretty unstable. So we've seen a U.S. administration that in the past couple of years has well, surprised us a couple of times, I think, by introducing tariffs on, for instance, steel and aluminum, on some other products in relation to the ongoing dispute on large aircraft. And I think in general, we have seen that there has been less transatlantic coordination on this front than we might have been used to under previous administrations. So I think, if anything, this uncertainty is probably the most worrying part of the transatlantic relation right now, from the perspective of doing business in the U.S. Coming from Europe, and probably also the other way around.
Thank you, Jérome. Martin, there's a question here. You talked about healthy eating, and I think people are turning to you for dietary advice, and so I was wondering if you could elaborate on what you said there.
Yes, I can try. Can you hear me now, or is my microphone working?
I can hear you good. I can hear you pretty well, yeah.
Okay. So the healthy eating is, I got that data from the FMI, Food Marketing Institute. I could send it to anybody who was asking for it. But because people are home and they have more time on their hands, they have more time to cook themselves and look at what they're eating. That's why there's an increase in healthy eating. Normally before the COVID-19, everybody's in a hurry. You know, you get your food in a few minutes, and now you have time to prepare it and sit down with the family. And that has led to an increase in healthy eating.
Thanks, Martin. We've run a little over time. I think we're about to wrap up here, but I wanted to ask Joe one last thing. The various expansion programs and infrastructure projects you discussed, to what extent are those continuing during the crisis? So to what extent do the various lockdown and social distancing measures affect that kind of projects?
Yes, Dan, I think that's a fair question. So we're fortunate that all of the key trades that we're relying on have been deemed essential workers. So we're able to keep the schedules. We have had a little bit of a delay specific to the cranes that we're getting from China. So because of their challenges with COVID, we have about a month delay on when they arrive. They're expected to be in Baltimore by April of 2021, but I'm happy to report that all of the other key components needed to keep the project alive and moving are working, and yeah, we're very fortunate that Governor Hogan has classified them as essential workers.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, one last one. Jérome, are there incentive programs for the Dutch government as a result of the COVID pandemic that could help Dutch companies expand to and do business in the US? That's a good question to close on.
A very good question. Unfortunately, I don't think at the moment there are concrete programs on top of what we're already doing for businesses post-COVID. Frankly, I think the first response also from the government and policy side has been directly on the COVID impact on businesses nationally. So there's a lot of different kinds of support programs there to help companies survive in these very, very tough times. But I think, as Andrew has mentioned as well, I'm sure that as soon as this crisis starts to end, that we will look more into how we can get businesses back on their feet and also help them expand and make use of everything that the U.S. has to offer to them. So almost in an American way, I would say stay connected, stay here, and we'll be in touch with you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jérome, and thank you, Andrew, Joe, Martin, for participating in this webinar. I hope this has been useful to our attendees. Please follow up via email if you have any follow-up questions. and we'll try to distribute the video as well. Well, thank you guys, and have a good day.
Thank you for having me.